Hello and welcome to World Talks. I'm Diana Skaya. The 62nd Munich Security Conference, Europe's premier security gathering, has wrapped up, and the message was clear. Europe is rethinking its defense strategy. From fresh talks between France and Germany on extending French nuclear protection to new signals of closer EU-UK defense cooperation, major powers appear ready to deepen military coordination in an increasingly uncertain security climate. My guest is director at the Terrorism Research Center at Civitas University, Paulina Piasecka. Paulina, welcome to the program. Now, let me ask you straight up, what for you were the key takeaways from the Munich Security Conference?
I think it was us getting assured that there is no recrossing or crossing back the red line of division between the European continent and the US. I do realize that Marco Rubio's statements were in the spirit of cooperation with Europe, but the spirit of cooperation that is based on the demands on one side to meet all of the conditions and to play our way or no way are not the real spirit of cooperation. It's rather dictating the terms of mutual help, which should be just that, mutual help.
As you mentioned, Marco Rubio, here I am going to ask you what he did say at that conference is that it ended with talk of a new era of geopolitics. Correct me if I'm wrong, this is what how Marco Rubio put it, right? What does that actually mean in practical terms for Europe?
Well, I think it's the end of the times of liberal cooperation and this idea that there is more to be taken away from cooperation rather than competition. I think we are re-entering the world of the realpolitik, this idea that nation-first approach is the only right approach, which sort of equals the strength in international relations with being right in international relations, which is sort of getting away from this idea that we play the game of the good guys and the bad guys, and we're getting back to the sort of 19th century game of who's the stronger and the strongest, preferably player, and not who has the right and who promotes the values that are the best for the international community as a whole.
So, okay, let me ask you this then. So if Europe truly has to re-examine its role, right? You're saying, a difference here, difference there. What does that mean in military terms? I mean, more spending, command structures, nuclear deterrence. How do you see that?
Well, first and foremost, if the declarations about the sort of autonomy in becoming the nuclear power in itself for Europe means that we are getting on this big chessboard of countries, or rather actors, that can threaten one another, a total annihilation. That's probably one of the most important points and takeaways from the conference. But also, apart from just spending on defense, I think it's worth stressing that it needs to be a very directed spending. We can't talk about just spending more on the military structures. We're talking about going on the offensive and financing the offensive side of our militaries. It's not about the wages in the military. It's not about the structures of support. It's about regaining the ability to become the fully autonomous also on the defense industry level player in international relations. So it's not just about that we spend more money. It's also about where we spend our money and what for we are spending this money for.
Paulina, let me ask you, if we have to look at it from a Polish perspective, this entire Munich Security Conference, what can you tell us?
This is going to be very, very tricky. I think for quite some time we've been worried about this sort of division between the presidential and governmental side of the international aspect of Polish politics. But for the time being, it might be that we'll just need those two players, because there is going to be a time when we will have to, well, maybe not play both sides, but we will need to be as sure as possible that we are engaged to a greatest possible extent in building this European defense identity, but also that we maintain the best possible cooperation with the US, in which this slight division between the narratives and approaches of the president and the prime minister of the Republic of Poland might be, which is sort of counterintuitive, quite useful. But from the point of view of Poland, it's crucial that, this is going to be an opinion. I think that we do need the autonomous European defense system and European defense identity, because no matter what, if we find ourselves in a situation that we're completely dependent on an ally that's an ocean away, and that actually in a very, very straightforward manner puts the national interest first, it might not be the best long-term guarantee for the Polish security.
Paulina, let me ask you this. French President Emmanuel Macron says Europe must become a geopolitical power. But now, can it actually do that without political unity, which still seems fragile?
It's going to be near impossible. You're absolutely right in framing this question the way you just framed it. Yes, we are if you looked at the real map of the world, not the Mercator projection, but the actual proportions between the continents and the countries, you could see that Europe is actually really, really, really small continent. Only in the unity, only in combining and finding synergy in between the demographic potential, financial potential, economic potential, and industrial potential, can we find ourselves as the autonomous player that can actually be resilient against potential negative influences, and even if push comes to shove, against an attack that could be directed at Europe.
Let me ask you this, just a little bit to shift gear, but yet to stay on somewhat of the same topic and the main issue that all of Europe has, mainly, particularly Eastern Europe, let me say this. There's a lot of tough talk about not rewarding aggression, yet conversations with Moscow, with Putin continue. Is Europe trying to deter Russia and negotiate with Russia at the same time? How is that looking like?
Well, I'm trying to avoid calling Russia the terrorist state, because in my methodological worldview as an academic, the terrorists can only be a non-state actors, and Russia is the state. Thus, it shouldn't be a terrorist. But negotiating with Russia is just like negotiating with terrorists. You should not talk to them, because if you start talking to them, then they feel that they have the power to push back against you and gain something from lengthening the negotiation and providing for the existence of even bigger humanitarian catastrophe or even bigger violence. But then on the other hand, there are human lives at stake. And also we are talking about negotiating against, or that sounds terrible. You don't negotiate against somebody, theoretically at least. Negotiating with the state that actually has at their disposal nuclear potential. And I think also this talk about becoming the fully autonomous nuclear power and creating, as we've already mentioned, the talks between France and Germany, this nuclear potential that would make us not the defensive but the offensive player, might sort of change the balance in the negotiations. The question remains whether or not Ukraine will last long enough for us to build this potential that will enable us to fully support the Ukrainian defense effort.
Speaking of Ukraine now, what's your take on a report suggesting that Moscow could actually be dangling, if that's the word I can use, economic incentives to Washington? How worried should Europe be about a potential, say, US or Russia reset that actually sidelines Ukraine?
I'm trying to be as diplomatic here as I possibly can, but I don't think we really should look for the nuance too much. The U.S. national defense, not defense, I'm sorry, the national security strategy of the United States mentions the idea of America first definitely more than one time. And almost all of the communication from the White House and White House representatives during any forum in which they are representing their country underlines that exact statement, America first. And we are getting further and further away from being led by values. We're being led by national interests, to stress the national part here, which means that I don't think it's completely unimaginable. I think it's actually possible that if the incentive offered is high enough and it can justify the switch in policies by saying the interest of our citizens, of the citizens that we were chosen by and that we serve, it might just push the US and the current administration towards this potentially tragic shift in their policies that we're talking about here.
Paulina, after Munich, do you think that Europe is actually moving towards genuine strategic autonomy, or do you think that it's still fundamentally dependent on the United States for hard security?
Europe needs to be moving towards the real strategic autonomy because it's sort of a vicious circle. We are strategically independent, or we are moving towards this goal because we need to be strategically independent because we have just had the rug pulled from under us. We've been told, and firmly so, that not only will the US support only the countries that are able to support themselves, not only have we been told that America comes first, and so any sort of alliance must serve also the interests of the US, which are defined by the US and solely by the US and not the best interests of international cooperation. And so even if there is a pushback, even if there is some sort of political unwillingness in order to tighten the European ties, I think the survival instinct of both European citizens and European politicians will put us in a position in which we will regain by necessity this strategic autonomy that should have been our goal probably for quite some time.
Paulina Piasecka, thank you so much for breaking it all down for us here on World Talks today. Thanks for all your input.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for watching this episode of World Talks. I'm Diana Skaya. I'll see you here next time.